Hello everyone, this is Ezekiel Dasho, and let's draw this holly in a vase. So I've got my photograph here, and it's going to be sort of similar to the rose in the vase drawing that I did a little while back, if you caught that one. And right now I just want to get a sense of where the boundaries of the vase are going to be located within the picture. I'm using a a hard charcoal pencil. And the idea with this picture is going to be sort of similar to the concept of how I would go about drawing a graphite drawing of the same thing. And if I was going to do a labor-intensive treatment, I would start with a harder pencil to get everything sketched in very lightly, and then I would gradually add layers in a darker and darker. And so it'll be similar process with different pencils. And so far I just laid in this oval here, and I'm just dropping down verticals from the sides to establish a general shape for the vase. And this curve at the bottom could also be easier to see if you conceptualize it as an unbroken oval rather than as just a curve, sort of like that. And then let's look at this angle here in the vase. Ooh. And the angle that the lip of the vase is much sharper than the angle that the base of the vase is, because of where the camera is in perspective. So we've got this almost ellipse here, and trailing into the leaf of the holly here. So let's go ahead and block this holly, and it just feels good to gently, quickly sketch it in. And I would say that I'm using a kind of combination of wrist and shoulder. I'm trying to rely on my shoulder as heavily as I can, but I'm just kind of letting it be natural and sort of go with what feels loose and quick and free as I'm just enjoying, sketching it in here. And I don't want any sharp lines or rather heavy lines. I don't want to press down heavily at all. The charcoal is so dark that I can just drag it along the paper and it will look like I'm pressing in hard with a graphite pencil or something like that. So I'm pressing very lightly and just continuing to build up these shapes here. And let's do a sphere for that. Another light sphere for the berries, and just kind of enjoying that bright red. And then up here we have like this little stem, and we'll just go around, building up what we see here, drawing in as lightly as we can, and trying to be as accurate as possible without belaboring the fluidity and freedom of the sketch. And I want to keep it looking light and natural and fluid, not heavy-handed at all. I would rather have some stray lines and some maybe rogue lines or escapees, maybe some bad lines. I would rather have a few of these trailing off from the sketch in a light way that suggests the motion of the hand than have a line of perfect exactitude that's really heavy and scarring the surface of the paper. And it goes back to that concept of what we talked about before. When you draw a sphere or draw a circle, if you lightly draw with your shoulder and quickly make the shape of a circle over and over again, you'll get a much better looking circle than you would if you just drew one rough line. It takes a good deal of practice to be able to draw a perfectly symmetrical circle, and that's always a good thing to practice. But for instance, with these berries, I definitely recommend sketching them in quickly and relying on the lightness of the lines to give the viewer the impression of the perfect sphericity rather than getting out a compass or a magnifying glass and some kind of tool, or just beating yourself up about drawing imperfect circles or something. Much better to just keep it free and easy. I'm keeping these edges of these leaves really light as well, and we'll go in and establish the value differences shortly after we have the main bulk of the picture built. So it's just finishing up this building phase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 berries, 8 berries. Maybe there's one hiding right behind here. Well, we'll not sweat that too much. We've got the main forms built in, and these are sprigs of rosemary, I believe. Kind of have a pine needle quality, and rather than, this will sort of be like the principles of drawing hair, rather than worrying too much about each individual one, you can just kind of do impressions of the shapes that you see to create the illusion of the rosemary sprig, the pine needle look. Okay, so we've got this built up here. Let's take a quick look at the shine on the vase, this dark ceramic vase here. And so maybe block out some of these areas where we see some extra bright highlights. So I'm seeing one there, a triangle of them here. There are multiple light sources in this kitchen, so it creates this nice reflective look here. And these are just for reference. We may well adjust those as we go here. So I'm just lightly blocking some space out for those. And we can look at some of the ways the light's wrapping around, and we can see this wraparound effect of the shadow here. It's like an occlusion shadow up this curve here. And then more diffuse bit of shadow coming from this side. And the Terminator shadow looking like it's about here. And then some bounce back lighting on this side, so maybe we'll go ahead and block that out a little bit too. And now I'm just going to lightly apply that first set of value to the top mid of the vase. And then let's get onto some more of the shading, and that's kind of the fun part of this picture. That's the fun part of most pictures. So I'm just seeing some variations in the tone of the ceramic here. Like on the top, it's a little more glossy and dark blue, and then it meets this edge here, and it's a little bit like a stippled gray, black almost. So those are textural differences that you can just be aware of as you go, or if they're not really registering, don't really worry about them. So we've got this layer here, layer there, and I've done my cross hatching kind of this way and this way, and so now I want to get a vertical and horizontal in just to mark this out as darker. On this side of the vase we have, and it's pretty monochromatic in my studio area, so let's just get a little bit of tone there, or value, and I want these curves to come through here and here. And so we'll go ahead and start drawing some of these shadows as well. So the shadows on this are a little bit complex, and let's look at this dark shadow first, this one that extends back here. I'll roughly draw the shape of this shadow here. And something like that. This shadow, we'll go ahead and let's get this little highlight line or low light line. But this shadow here, we'll just cover it with a quick light value. And then we'll draw in the one that overlaps it here. And it's stretched out a little more. And the form, it goes off to the edge of the camera. Of this wraparound curve form there. And then another there. So what we can do is kind of use these as good excuses to cross hatch a little bit, or just lay that tone in systematically, and as you as we cover it in, as we apply it, you can see that this area here is getting darker with the overlapping effect. And may have to hit it a few extra times just to make sure that it's looking dark relative to the shadows next to it. And then finally we'll bring this shadow here. And these shapes, they're important, but just getting the impression of the shape, I think, is good. You know, it's more important that you use a soft touch so that it's diffuse and the edges are shadow-like, not line-like, so that it has a shaded look rather than a drawn look. And then on these edges, they can be darkened just a little bit to impart that feeling of a light meeting a dark in the highlights or in the sort of shadow boundaries. There's lots of shadow work you could do in this drawing. We'll kind of leave that for a moment, and then we'll return maybe a little bit later. But so now it's going to be either really important to keep your hand off the paper or get a paper towel or something and make sure that you're not smudging the paper when you're drawing on the rest of the image. So what I'm seeing is a relatively dark section of the vase by where the leaf starts to overlap. So we'll just darken that up and probably come back in with the darker pencil in a few minutes here. And let's go ahead and look at some of the shapes of these shadows here on the leaves. And so we see that there's this shape here, kind of, and a shape here. This process of kind of clocking up the shapes that the shadows are in it's really fun, but it's also, I think, helps define what you're drawing as a three-dimensional object in the space that you've created, rather than having it look flat. And these shapes of the shadows are sort of like the drawings that the light is making on the object. And forgetting about them can often lead to a very flat, uninteresting picture. Let's do some shading here. And some of these holly berries almost have these highlights that are almost like the highlights in an eye, or in like a jewel, something like that. I want to leave those pretty white so that they look shiny there. This This back leaf is pretty dark, so we'll go ahead and darken that. For this picture, similar to sometimes with hair, the areas that are dark should also be devoid of detail. And then the areas that are lighter and brighter can have more detail. But there are so many there's so many benefits to using that approach. I found that, so like if it's really dark, I might see some details in the photo, but I'm going to leave them out in the drawing. I'm just going to have a nice dark flat area right there. And then in the areas where it's much brighter, sort of by the holly berries and the leaves up here, I would put in more detail, or maybe over here where we can see the light on the sprigs of rosemary. You know, go ahead and amp the details up there because it's in the light. So the effect it has, especially if you're going to do like a more detailed picture, is that the light illuminates the object and then allows the detail to become visible, and it amplifies the illuminating effect of the light. So for places like this, you know, the details, getting into some of these details here, even if not in a super fine, you know, fine tooth way, it is definitely more detailed than, for instance, that black leaf that I just, or that background leaf that I just colored in. So for this leaf up here, much lighter on the first pass anyway. And I may, I don't know, come back with an eraser and do some of the, hit some of the areas of this leaf for a highlight. I brought it in from outside, so it's a little wet in the picture, and that's where that glossy highlight's coming from. It's just a little wet. So these areas on this leaf that look like I've got them highlighted, they're actually not in direct light, so I need to shade over those a little bit. I still want to retain the shape of those darker shadows though. Okay, we'll get this leaf. We're getting pretty close to the end for this one. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the tile in the background. You could definitely do that, but just wanted to go through the process of how I would build this up, and makes for a lovely still life. And just take a quick look at what happens when we add some of the softer pencils. And so far this has all just been with a rather hard charcoal. And let's go ahead and switch it up and see what happens. So, well, kind of medium, next phase up. next level of softness up. So this charcoal just dustifies a lot faster on the paper than the harder pencil. So if you're partial to using smudging tools or Q-tips to smooth your values and transitions and stuff, these softer pencils are great for that, because they create a lot of dust for you to play with. And I also find it just really useful to have a range of, you could get a little of the stippling in with the vase here, have a range of darknesses to employ. So that you don't have to rely on pressure and like applying an even amount of pressure to different places to get the result you want. You can use the same amount of pressure, which in my case is like none, and just switch the pencils and get an even consistency of darkness throughout without having to rely on the physical, hand control kind of method of making everything consistent. Since I get this a little light, darker than I've let it here, and the shadow is a little darker. Let's pop that up there. I've got this darker line kind of under the vase here too. It's on a pretty shiny surface. I'm going to switch back to the hard pencil for just a second and show what I'm seeing. I don't know how well it's coming up in the camera or on the computer, but the photograph, you can kind of see the reflection of the vase, and it just does this kind of a thing. And it's most noticeable near the edge. And I may have pronounced it a little too roughly on this side, but it's okay for the purposes of this demonstration. I think it's good. And it'll also, it's definitely not going to hurt the look of the picture. Multiple light sources and reflections and stuff, and it's fine. Okay, so back to the medium pencil, and let's just do some more of these like shadow, kind of creating highlights by adding shadow in certain places. It's like this area here needs to be much darker. And at this point, what we're basically doing is shading that oval that we drew at the very beginning. So if you kind of remember where that oval was in your picture, we're shading it as if the light was coming from the upper left, just like that angle on the back of the wall shows you which way it's coming from. These are basically just gloss effects and things like that. So go up in here and get a few details in here. Use the darkness to accentuate some of these rosemary sprigs. forgotten a few. I'm going to switch back to my harder pencil just to sketch some of these in, and for the sake of keeping it consistent throughout with having the layer of the harder pencil and then going to the softer. And just getting the sense of the shape of these sprigs in. And they are pretty dark in this area, so now that I've sketched those in, I'm going to go in with the medium and add little hints of darkness to one side of each. Not necessarily each, but just get the tonal depth in there. While we're at it, we'll use this medium and we'll go in and get some of the shadows in some of these other places too. Sometimes it's a little bit counterintuitive with how you would normally draw, but sometimes you draw the things in back first and then draw over them, similar to if you're painting. For this, that works pretty well. So like this, see if space, like this dark shape here then gets drawn over by another dark shape there and another one there, and the effect is that each space is overlapping correctly. So you can see how much darker these darker pencils can go. These holly berries have a little bit of some little spots on them here and there. I want to add some value in next to this line that I made here because it's so sharp, and because I'm seeing it have this kind of gradation as well, but I don't want it just to be sticking out there like a outline on a cartoon. And this sleeve here could do some of the similar treatment. Basically just these areas that have none of the medium pencil. I just need to get a little bit in certain places to remain consistent with the main drawing. I want to get this nice sharp pointy edge here. And then let's get some more there. Okay, so let's maybe some of these areas, like they can come a little closer to the leaf. Yeah. Let's switch to the supple charcoal pencil, the softest of the bunch. And let's find some of these places that could use some darkening. So looking at one of the drawing groups that I follow on Facebook, and it's a pretty big group, but I don't know, I think it was the 30,000 person group, but it might have been like 1,000 person group. It was a pretty big group, and someone had written a comment, like an open question that said, what are charcoal pencils for? They seemed like they were in earnest. But someone else posted back pretty quickly with a charcoal drawing that said, for drawing silly, they're pencils. I thought that was kind of funny, but it wasn't very descriptive, I guess. It wasn't a very descriptive answer. It was just a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I think. But made me think about some of the reasons why I like to use charcoal pencils sometimes instead of graphite. And it just kind of has to do with how much value you want to be able to add in, how quickly and stuff like that. It's also, there definitely is a different feel to it. There's also a different amount of like motility. It's kind of easier to run around with graphite pencils and draw quick and easy and accurate and not have it smudge, and run around with the charcoal pencils and stuff. It's a little messier, and close your book, and maybe if you haven't used a fixative, it'll start to smudge on your sketchbook right away. And but there's almost a painting feel you get with the charcoal. Very similar to graphite, but I think charcoal maybe takes a little more getting used to in this modern world where we all grow up with graphite pencils in school. And it's just a matter of preference and how you want the look of the drawing to to be, and in some cases you can get almost the exact same look from the two. But I think you can get kind of deeper blacks from charcoal without having to wear into the paper too much. And then by contrast, you get brighter lights. But it can take some practice to get the sharper shades or the sharper fine details. Okay, well, this video is probably running a little long. If you're with me, thanks for being with me, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Definitely, if you think this is interesting to anybody else, share it with them, and anybody who likes to draw. And check back regularly. I'll be posting more videos soon. And I hope you had a good holiday weekend, for those of you who are watching contemporaneously. And yeah, thanks again. This is Ben Ezekiel Dasho, and I will see you next time.